Throughout the 1770s and 1820s, Abigail Adams used her knowledge gained by being self-taught to fight for the political and educational rights of women, as she became frustrated as women weren't recognized in the U.S. She felt it was her responsibility to help women gain recognition. Abigail was able to make a change in history for women by fighting for them to be given the same rights as men. This movement gave women a chance to be talked about in the political movements, as they were also given more civil rights.
On November 22, 1744, Abigail Adams was born in Weymouth, Massachusetts. During the 1700s, women did not have many rights, including educational privileges. Boys were the only ones allowed to attend school, and girls were directed to stay home. This meant that if Abigail wanted education, she would have to take it into her own hands. She began reading books in her father's extensive library and learned from well-educated tutors who visited her home. Abigail's grandfather, Colonel John Quincy, had a knowledge of public service and was frequently worried about the community, as he influenced Abigail's values and helped her gain a sense of public responsibility. She mentions that her grandfather was remarkable for never praising anybody. He did not speak evil, but he seldom spoke well. Due to all the education she received at home, she learned to have a voice for herself and learn about political matters. After years of learning what she wanted in a partner, she decided that she wanted a husband who was appreciative of her success, someone intelligent and well-educated. John Adams was a lawyer who attended Harvard College and was a straightforward and independent individual. When John first met Abigail, he did not consider her ladylike, as she possessed qualities of both capacity and gumption. He considered that they cut him down in size, but he later learned to admire these qualities. While John Adams was in Boston, he and Abigail wrote each other a series of 16 letters between April 12th and May 9th, 1762, during their courtship. After consistent writing, they decided to get married on October 25th, 1764, in Weymouth, Massachusetts. Soon after their marriage, Abigail gave birth to their first child named Abigail, but they call her Nabby Adams. She later had 6 children, 4 who lived until their adulthood. In 1774, John Adams had to leave Abigail and their children behind, as he needed to go to Philadelphia to attend the First Constitutional Congress. He needed to attend this Congress because Great Britain and the 13 colonies had a rising tension that was going to turn into violence. This separation between the two would lead to them writing a correspondence to each other that was a significant change in history. On March 31st, 1776, during the Second Continental Congress, Abigail Adams wrote a correspondence to John while he was away. Abigail mainly focused on communicating with John Adams on how women should be able to receive independence just like the men at the time. She wrote a letter to Adams expressing her opinions. In that letter she wrote, "I desire you would remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention are not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." John Adams took her letter as it was a joke, and it seemed unrealistic at the time. But Abigail insisted and made it clear that women needed to be included when building a future independent country. She became passionate about the rights of women due to the fact that growing up, she and many women at the time had a lack of educational and political rights. This urged her to become more involved and knowledgeable about political life. After many months of Abigail supporting John through correspondence and publicly, he became President of the United States. Abigail began to notice that the presidential residency was left in poor condition, so she made it her responsibility to organize and manage it as the First Lady. She took the opportunity to advocate for women's rights, as her husband was a major figure in politics. She formed her own opinions and spoke publicly, which caused her some criticism from major political figures like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, but she was willing to do anything to support her husband in gaining rights for women. While John Adams was in Europe, Abigail would write to him from home as she was taking care of the household and their children. It was her responsibility as a mother to take care of the household and care for the children, as many women did at the time. She later decided to join him in Europe to view what it was like in another country. The trip there was rough for her as she felt sick and was not used to that kind of travel. Once she arrived, she considered the customs in Europe. Abigail would write to her family members and friends from back home, informing them of life in Europe. She had a very strong and descriptive words towards the English royalty, as she strongly disliked them. As she disagreed with royalty at the time, she also disagreed with John Adams, as they were not on the same page over the fight for independence.
However, on April 14, 1776, Adams didn't consider Abigail's request and took it humorously. He said, "No better than to repel our masculine systems." Her advocacy wasn't taken into immediate action during the draft of Declaration of Independence. Adams showed that he and other male leaders weren't willing to challenge the current social order. His response made it clear during the 1770s that women had no right in politics or in lawmaking. Abigail's request, though powerful, didn't make legal changes, and women continued to be excluded from holding office, owning property, and voting. Many of the men during this time frame viewed Abigail's request as comprehensive. Since women had little knowledge of her appeal due to societal restrictions on political debates and education, they had no voice in the law. The huge impact of Abigail's advocacy was limited to a private discussion rather than policy changes. Women's roles in their household remained unchanged, and they continued to be legally dependent on their husbands. After the Revolution, many new state constitutions reinforced male control, rather than trying to expand the rights of women. Social expectations had continued to emphasize passive and domestic responsibilities for women, with few opportunities for education or employment outside their household jobs. Her words weren't taken into full thought. It took many years for Abigail to influence the nation with social change. Abigail passed away on October 28, 1818. She couldn't see immediate success in her lifetime, but the world had changed because of her advocacy. As a step towards equal academic opportunities, Mount Holyoke Female Seminary was created in 1837. This was one of the earliest universities for women. In the late 18th, more schools began to accept female students as a result of her outlook that women deserved to have access to education. Later, legislation granted women the freedom to own property apart from their husbands. This was influenced by Abigail's advocacy for women's legal independence. The most impactful legislative success for women's rights was the Married Women's Property Acts. It was approved in many states beginning in 1839 and gave women the ability to manage property. Over time, more women pursued careers outside of the domestic service, leading to the rights for economic and educational rights. Women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton continued Abigail's ideas throughout history. Later, campaigns pushed for full political rights of Abigail's idea that women should be given financial and legal authority. This movement created the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the right to vote worldwide. The 19th Amendment gave women the recognition to have the ability to participate in democracy. However, Abigail's demands had gone against the gender standards, which many men opposed. Women's rights delayed reforms, and this made women fight for the legal recognition in the 20th century. Abigail's ideas of education grew larger, with women pursuing education and employment by the 20th century. Today, Abigail's legacy remains important in many struggles women face, like their leadership, reproductive rights, and equal pay.
Abigail Adams was a pivotal figure in the fight for women's rights and education in early American history. As she was denied formal educational opportunities, she pursued knowledge independently, showcasing resilience and personal responsibility. Her self-education empowered her to advocate for women's political rights, as seen in her correspondence with John Adams, where she urged him to remember the ladies. Balancing family duties and political engagement, Abigail laid the groundwork for future advocacy. Although she did not achieve immediate success, her legacy continues to inspire generations, highlighting the enduring struggle for gender equality and the importance of educational and rights for women.